Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talked to Rene Ritchie of youtube.com/Rene Ritchie about Apple's CSAM protections. Now that we've had a week to kind of pull apart everything and detail everything, Rene Ritchie gives us the lowdown on the reactions to the reactions, and gives us kind of an understanding of everything now that it has all come out. We also talked to CoinDesk's Nick D about that infrastructure bill in the United States and what it has to do with the cryptocurrency tax that many crypto heads are talking about. Then we round things out with our stories of the week. I talk about a master face that can sort of trick facial recognition, and Jason Howell gives us the lowdown on Samsung's Unpacked event as we fold the show to a close. All of that's coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 196, recorded Thursday, August 12th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. With 7 studios and over 5,800 hours of IT training, IT Pro TV creates the perfect environment for you to learn IT, and they are always adding new content. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use the code TNW30 at checkout.
And by Akamai. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. To deliver and protect your digital experiences worldwide, tap into Akamai for its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability. Just visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Micah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. Good to see you, Micah.
Hello, Jason Howell. How are you today?
I'm doing quite all right. How are you doing, sir?
Quite all right myself. I've had my morning coffee, and I've done the strange accents I needed to do for the day. So let's kick things off. Last week, as we had sort of gone through the show, right at the end there, I had a little bit of a breaking news piece because during the show, my story of the week surrounded the rumors or reports that Apple was going to be announcing some new child protection stuff. The reason I say stuff is because there are multiple facets of it. And at the end of the show, Apple officially pulled back the curtain on these different features and talked about those. Since the introduction and announcement of those, there's been a lot that has happened. There have been lots of different reports, lots of different explanations, lots of different misunderstandings and re-understandings. And who better to join us today to help us kind of sort through these different stories and pull out the truth, the kernels of truth that exist there, than Rene Ritchie of youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. Welcome back to the show, Rene.
Micah Sargent, we have breaking news about Apple and privacy.
Thank you for being here today to talk about this. So, I think that a lot of people have heard about this by now. But before we kind of dig into things, can you kind of just give us the layout? Basically, if you go to apple.com/child-safety, Apple kind of talked about is it 3 or 4 different things that they are releasing? Can you just give us the kind of bullet points of the different things that they announced?
Yeah, absolutely. I will preface this by saying it took me 43 minutes in a video a couple days ago to actually explain the context and nuance of all this. So forgive me if I gloss over things or I'm overly general just in the quick introduction. But the first one is Syrian search features that if you have questions about child endangerment, all of this, you can ask Siri and Siri will point you to resources, or you can type it into the search and it'll give you resources. Also, if you try to search for child exploitation images, Siri or search will tell you that can be dangerous and is problematic for a variety of reasons, and they'll point you to places where you can get help if you need it. The second one is communication safety, and what that does is add a feature to the Messages app, not the iMessage service, because it also works for SMS and MMS, that allows parents, as part of their parental controls, to flip a switch. And once that switch is flipped, it will automatically blur any image that the machine learning, the computer vision system, the same one that tells you your photos have cats or cars or anything in them, will tell you that this image contains explicit, sexuality, and you'll have to click to actually view it. When you do, you'll get a warning screen that says, these images can be problematic, for it's in very child-friendly language, and do you really want to see it? At that point, you can click yes. If you're 12 years old or under, your parents can flip a second switch, and none of this is on by default, but they can flip a second switch that says, alert me if my child clicks yes on this. And that way, if you press view and then you press yes and then you press yes again, after knowing they'll get that notification, they'll get that notification. And some people are concerned that might, for example, out non-hetero kids to potentially abusive or abandoning parents. The third and final feature is basically child sexual exploitation image scanning, CSAM. So what it does is every major company scans for this. Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Imager and Snap, and all those companies reported and detected hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of images last year. Apple reported 256, not 265, just 265. So Apple wants to change that. They no longer will abide those images being on their service, known images of a CSAM on their servers, but they don't want to scan the server to do it. Every other company basically uses some version of Microsoft Photo DNA to just scan the servers for them. Apple believes it's your stuff on the server, we don't want to touch it. And so what they're doing is a hybrid model that has a hash matching sequence on your phone that gets rid of any image that doesn't match first, so they don't ever have to know anything about it. And if there are potential matches, it goes to their server to decrypt the headers. If that doesn't work, then there's nothing that they can ever learn about that image. If it does work, it secures a voucher, sends it to Apple. And if you accumulate enough of these vouchers, and Apple won't say how many because they don't want anybody to deliberately reduce their number of these images, that'll get reported to Apple. Apple will have a human being verify them, which I can only imagine is one of the worst jobs imaginable. Mm-hmm. And then if they find it to be accurate, known, existing child sexual exploitation material, they'll alert an NGO, a nonprofit organization started by the government, but it's called NCMEC, and it's their job to validate all of this and then file the appropriate reports with law enforcement. But the big disconnect here is that Apple has historically believed that on-device means private. They don't want to put anything on their servers. They don't want to round-trip anything to their servers. But when it comes to this, when it becomes to something that's not being used for us to identify our doggy pics, but it's being used to identify something that gets reported, we see it as the opposite of private. We see it as an invasion, if not a violation. And so since then, everything has just exploded.
So there's some clarification I want to do, because I remember a while back, I think it was a report originally in Forbes that take that with a grain of salt, as you will, that was talking about the server side scanning, CSAM scanning, that a company can do. So up to this point, has Apple been doing things server side like all of the other companies that do this, relatively regularly? And instead of doing it on the server side, they want to switch it to local? Or was it the case that should a law enforcement agency come along and say this is the concern, then they activated this scanning server side? So basically, I'm wondering, was the server-side scanning active at Apple already up to this point, as that Forbes article suggested, again, from, I think, a year ago or so? Or is it that they didn't have that turned on kind of as an active scanning thing and they wanted to just do things locally?
Yeah, and that's been super confusing. What Apple has done in the past is very minimal scanning of iCloud email, to the extent that, again, last year they reported 265 images compared to Facebook's 20 million and Google's 500,000, and Imagers like I think 140,000 some odd images. But they never went to iCloud photo library. They want zero knowledge of what photos you have stored on their server. So this is the first time they're going to be matching CSAM images against iCloud photo library.
Gotcha. That's the clarification that I needed, because that was actually a misunderstanding on my part where I misinterpreted it's just the emails. So yeah, the article from Forbes was how Apple, quote, intercepts and reads emails when it finds child abuse. Yeah. So that's good to know. Now let's talk about encryption in general, because I saw you talking yesterday about one of the aspects of the way that kind of the privacy versus security debate comes up, and that's about end-to-end encryption. Could you explain what you talked about? You mentioned, speaking to a very patient backup engineers, I think it was, about the differences that different folks have when it comes to encryption, and then talk about Apple and iCloud encryption and whether that's end-to-end.
Yeah, so it's back when we were both working at iMore, and we were doing World Backup Day, and I was trying to ask a bunch of backup vendors how to do encrypted backups, because that's my natural default state. I'm the person who reads InfoSec Twitter and just like encrypt everything. And they said, well, here's a procedure to do it, and here's why you shouldn't do it. And I was very confused. And they said, if you look at InfoSec Twitter, everything is an attack, everything is an assault, everything needs to be protected and locked down. But for most normal people, and I think a lot of photographers especially are keenly aware of this, the biggest risk isn't someone trying to steal your data or a government trying to seize your data. There are people that's a big risk for, but most of us don't live under that specific threat model. What happens is we have a fire or a flood or a disk fails, or the disk is stolen, but like we just want the pictures. There's nothing bad on it. It's like our wedding photos, our baby photos. So for most people, losing access to their data is a far bigger potential threat than having it stolen or seized. And there was someone on Twitter yesterday, I'm blanking on the name, who made it a good analogy and said, in some cases we take encryption so extremely that it becomes a denial of service attack on ourselves. And I feel that because I locked myself out of Dropbox when they first put up end-to-end encryption for months, like about a month. I couldn't get into Dropbox. And Apple had an original iCloud backup system that required you to print out and keep a recovery key. And their support quickly learned that people forget their passwords and lose their recovery keys. And then they couldn't help them anymore. And whatever they had, like your phone gets destroyed and it's all the photos you had on your phone, or something happens to your Mac. One of those things they couldn't help. So when they created the new system, Apple kept a copy of the keys. And that meant that they could create what is frankly an incredibly tedious process, but they can recover the account for you. But at the same time, because they can recover an account, they now have to respond to law enforcement requests to recover those accounts. And there's some hope that some people want them to do both options, for people who really want it. Or some people think that because Apple's going to be doing contact recovery, you can assign a contact to recover your account for you. They'll be able to lock it down more. But the way I see it, like a lot of the problems with the arguments we're seeing is that they treat the CSAM stuff is new and novel when it's not. These pressures have always been there. And even now, if you have like a legacy contact, we all want a legacy contact. If something happens to us, we need our families to get our stuff. But can the government then say, oh, you got to use that now because we have a subpoena? All of these things are, in my opinion, far more nuanced and complex than a lot of the discussion has been so far.
Right. Yeah. And of course, that is the issue that comes with any kind of new and late breaking topic. Last week, whenever this first came about, Jason and I had kind of talked about how we liked the fact that there was some sort of grace given when it came to the messages where a kid, sending potentially lewd photograph would be kind of notified, and it would sort of work up to reporting to the parent. And so they had the opportunity to kind of not choose to do that. And I am somewhat ashamed to say that as a queer person, I had not considered in this original, spur of the moment understanding of this new technology, the potential for outing. And that was something that kind of...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like our mutual friend Georgia Dow also pointed out to me that there's nothing to stop a husband from enrolling a wife who he's got, overly controlled as a child in the system as well. None of us can think of all of these things because we don't all experience these same realities.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as this has come out, there have been more nuanced discussions and nuanced conversations after kind of the initial reaction and all of the stuff that comes with that. And so I, have really appreciated being able to break this down, break this apart, and consider the positives and negatives and hear kind of the different takes on things. And ultimately, whether that leads to people switching platforms or Apple clarifying or making changes, that comes as it comes. But I guess the final question is, when will these, as Apple calls them, expanded protections for children be hitting devices? Or is it something that is rolled out on the server, which of course, we know is not the case, or is it something that'll be coming in the next version? Is it a hardware requirement? When will folks have this kind of technology and these different features on their devices?
Yeah, for sure. So it's coming to the US only, and it's coming with iOS 15, iPadOS 15, and for the communications and the Syrian search features to watchOS 8 and macOS Monterey. If you don't like any of this stuff as a parent, you don't have to turn it on. It's off by default. If you don't like it as a user, you can turn off iCloud Photo Library. But as we've been pointing out, Microsoft, Google, everybody scans for this in one way or another. So I think one of the hardest points for people who are privacy centric is that it took away the last non-scanning option. So if I could just quickly add I say this as someone who's not a privacy engineer, so it could be a ludicrous suggestion, but what I'd prefer is that Apple not have a notification option at all, but a block option, because to me that risks leaking no data, but is also much more consistent with the other options in parental controls, like blocking explicit lyrics or 18 and over movies. And I would also like to see them move the on-device component to a private relay server, like they're doing with the private relay service, because that way nobody has to have any code running on their device, but it also prevents Apple from having 100% knowledge of any of our libraries, which is what they want. So I don't know if that's workable, but if it is, that would be my ideal outcome.
Nice. Well, Rene Ritchie, of course, I want to thank you for joining us today. Folks can head to youtube.com/Rene Ritchie to check out your videos, including the one entitled The Ugly Truth About Apple's Privacy Panic. But if folks want to follow you online, where can they go to do so?
They can go right here on Twit, Mac Break Weekly, where Andy Inatko, Alex Lindsay, Leo Laporte, and myself have raucous discussions every week. Or they can go to youtube.com/Rene Ritchie or twitter.com/Rene Ritchie.
Excellent. Thank you, Rene. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Great seeing you both.
Thank you, Rene. Good to see you. All right, up next, crypto was actually a component of the recently passed and still somewhat in progress infrastructure bill. We're going to talk a little bit about how it relates to crypto, how it could have related on a deeper level, and some of the confusion around that up next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV, all about educating yourself about everything there is to know about IT and advancing or maybe even launching your own IT career in a fun and creative way. IT Pro TV is the best online source for IT education. Their edutainers make learning IT interesting and fun. IT Pro TV provides the most up-to-date information while also preparing you for the exams that give you the certs that employers are truly looking for in their future IT employees, and employers are looking for that IT knowledge now. So it's a good time to look deeper into this and get those certs. IT Pro TV has 7 studios, more than 5,800 hours of IT training, which creates just an awesome environment for you to learn IT, of course. And they're always adding new content over time. Courses are divided into 20 to 30-minute episodes. They are the official video training partner for CompTIA. IT Pro TV's courses are live. They're on demand worldwide, and you can get those on a variety of different devices: Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, PC. Of course, they have their iOS and Android apps, and you can learn anytime from the comfort of your own home and on your own schedule. Pretty awesome. IT Pro TV is actually having a free weekend coming up here, August 14th and 15th, and the following courses are going to be totally free, absolutely free. It's a great opportunity for anyone new to IT to kind of check out what it's all about. The courses are CompTIA IT Fundamentals Plus, Linux Essentials, Microsoft 365 Fundamentals, Apple Certified Support Professional Mac OS Support Essentials 1013, Hands-on PC Build, and Cisco CCT Routing and Switching. A whole lot to pick from there. Also, be sure to check out IT Pro TV's webinar about the new CompTIA Apprenticeship program that's available on demand when you go to itpro.tv/webinars. So whether you're an organization or maybe you're just an individual who's interested in starting and expanding your IT skills, it is time to check out IT Pro TV. You can get certified in Apple, security skills, Python, Cisco, and so many more. Just check it out for yourself. Go to itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 when you get there, and you'll receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/TNW, and make sure and use that code TNW30 for that additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey along the way. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, so after an apparent week of negotiations, the infrastructure bill in the U.S. Senate will pass with what amounts to broad language related to a cryptocurrency tax provision. There was hope along the way that things would be defined a bit more clearly, but in the end, that ultimately didn't happen. But what does this mean for crypto going forward? And joining me to talk all about this and break it down is Nikhilesh De, who's the regulatory reporter for CoinDesk. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to get you on. I appreciate your time, taking out some time to break this down because it caught my attention. I'm kind of like on the outside looking in when it comes to crypto. I'm fascinated by it, always looking to kind of expand my understanding of it. And I definitely saw on Twitter and some of the reaction after the infrastructure bill was kind of solidified, some dissatisfaction, let's say, on the minds of people who are really interested and present in the crypto space. So first of all, maybe we should talk about the gray area that's related to crypto that this provision, at least in the beginning, initially hoped to tackle. Why was it inserted into the infrastructure bill in the first place?
Yeah, so, well, that's really two questions, right? The first one is there a gray area that's, that the IRS here is looking to regulate? And I guess, the answer seems to be that the IRS does believe there are certain entities in the crypto industry that are not properly reporting their tax information. And that's a very valid concern. There's huge gaps in information reporting within the broader ecosystem, and crypto is certainly not immune to that. And so what this bill does is it creates a broadened definition of a broker for crypto tax reporting purposes. And that basically means that companies or entities that provide certain transaction services have to report more information specifically as a broker, so they have to file a specific form to the IRS for tax purposes. The second question is, why is it in this particular bill? And that one's a little harder to answer. It's being treated as a pay for, so it's not part of the actual infrastructure bills. There's no crypto infrastructure provision. It's just they're trying to raise $28 billion over 10 years, and they're looking to do that through this industry.
Okay. Yeah. And actually, I see someone in chat is kind of pointing out you already have to report crypto as income in the US, but that's really on gains primarily. Would this change that? Would this then sweep more kind of facets of crypto trading into the tax reporting realm? Say if if you're trading from one to another. Well, I don't know. I guess I'll stop with that question. What do you think about that?
Well, the big concern is, who exactly qualifies as a broker. And
Right.
the language of the actual bill just says, let me pull this up. I have it right here. It's any person who, for consideration, is responsible for regularly providing any service, effectuating transfers of digital assets on behalf of another person. So the concern is that might also include, node operators or validators or, miners. So parties that have a crucial role in the crypto ecosystem of maintaining blockchain network security and facilitating transactions, but they don't have customers the way that a trading platform or crypto exchange would, and so they might not be able to provide the same reporting information that these exchanges could, which might make it very difficult to comply with the bill as it's currently worded.
Okay, and this really did, you pointed out, you wrote pretty extensively about this as it was happening over the course of the week. And you really pointed out that, after all of this time, we had 8 days of negotiations and everything. And in the end, the wording of the bill or the wording of this particular provision is the same in the end as it was in the beginning. All of that time spent trying to refine, all for naught, essentially, and things weren't changed there. What was the missed opportunity? Like, what were you kind of hoping to see? What were people in the crypto space really hoping to see as far as a change here, a refinement?
Yeah, so the timeline of this whole thing was, at the end of July, people started reporting that there was this provision that taxes crypto. As the language, actually came out, we found out it was not a new tax, it was a broadening of an existing tax. And so it was introduced into the bill on the 1st of August, so literally less than 2 weeks ago. People within the industry in particular, advocated for changing it, Fight for the Future, which is not a crypto-specific organization, but it is a tech advocacy group, started a campaign to try and change it, specifically just to narrow the language to address brokers as trading platforms, exchanges, parties that have the KYC information that would be needed to comply. Several amendments were introduced, one by Senators Ron Wyden, Pat Toomey, and Cynthia Lummis, so a bipartisan group that sought to narrow it. Another amendment was introduced by Senators Mark Warner and Rob Portman, so again, another bipartisan group. However, none of these amendments were really considered because, not for crypto reasons, but in the end, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer just didn't allow any amendments to be discussed or voted on. So my understanding is that was all, that's just a political process. There was a lot going on outside of the crypto stuff, but no amendments were considered. There was a last-ditch effort on Monday to introduce a compromise amendment, but due to Senate procedural rules and a single objector, that also wasn't considered. And so now it's up to the House to take a look and most likely pass this as is.
Are you at all hopeful that the House of Representatives, I guess my limited understanding of the legal process at this point, it's off to the House of Representatives. Do they have the power or the ability to make any of these changes and then send that back over to the Senate? Or is that even likely to happen? And it sounds like it's probably pretty unlikely.
Yeah, so I'm doing some reporting around this. My understanding is that if the House were to try and change it, they would have to make sure that at the end of the day, the numbers still match up. So right now, the Senate projected that this provision would raise $28 billion across 10 years. If the House does change it, they'd have to have some reasonable attempt at squaring those numbers so that you don't suddenly have a $28 billion hole in whatever projected revenue you're generating. That being said, there is a bipartisan effort to try and modify the language. Earlier today, Representative Anna Issue out of California wrote a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying we should change this. We should adopt the compromise amendment introduced on Monday and modify the language. So my understanding is that, as of this morning, it's a long shot, but there's definitely a growing and, again, importantly, bipartisan effort to modify the language to try and narrow it down and ensure that, miners are not treated as brokers.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, this is, crypto is not new necessarily, but it is still kind of like this emerging thing. There's a lot of misunderstandings around it. People who are in it pretty darn clear on it. People who aren't, and I would, imagine that Washington, D.C. and lawmakers and stuff are, they're on the outside looking in, trying to figure out exactly what they do. And this is, of course, a part of that process. But this is also shining a light on the fact that cryptocurrency is in the zeitgeist enough for there to be energy and attention being placed on it in something as big as the infrastructure bill. What does this say about the legitimacy of cryptocurrency, at least in the eyes of Washington lawmakers?
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, it seems that Washington lawmakers think crypto is here to stay. I mean, at the end of the day, what we saw with even the introduction of this bill is a group of senators saying, we think crypto will stick around for at least the next 10 years and generate enough revenue that we can tax it. And I mean, I'm not here to, shill crypto or anything. My job is just to report on it. But that seems to me to be a striking endorsement of the idea that crypto is here to stay. So, clearly, even before the last couple of weeks started, lawmakers were saying, okay, well, this is an industry that's being, that exists, and we're going to have to take a look at that. And after the last 2 weeks, like I said, Fight for the Future started a call-in campaign, and I think they got at least 40 to almost 50,000 calls placed. So, there were a huge number of calls placed to the 100 senators' offices in the U.S. The provision, held up negotiations briefly, or were part of negotiations for quite a bit of, time for this huge $1 trillion infrastructure bill that's been a priority for the presidential administration. There's been a lot of noise. You've seen senators and House representatives on both sides of the political aisle weigh in on this and say, we think XYZ should happen. So it does seem that, DC, I don't think they're waking up. I think they've woken up to the fact that crypto is here, and they think of it as something that will remain for quite a while and has a growing political voice now.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm always intrigued by the kind of the movement of this through Washington, D.C. I feel like it's an interesting time, and people have their opinions as far as cryptocurrency and in their minds what the legitimacy of it is or not. And I read and hear a lot of people like, oh, it's not going to last, it's not going to stick around. I believe personally that it's here to stay, but I'm also fascinated by the journey, and that's why I wanted to invite you on. So I appreciate you joining us today, Nick. Nick writes for CoinDesk, CoinDesk.com. If people want to follow you online and the work you're doing, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter. I publish all my articles on CoinDesk, as you said, and I also do publish a newsletter for CoinDesk. All of that's on my Twitter. I can send a link or something.
Well, let's see. Is your I'm sorry I didn't put that in here. Is it just your first and last name?
Yeah, first name, last
name.
Right. No spaces or anything.
All right. For audio listeners, that's at NIKHILESHDE. Nick, thank you so much for hopping on and talking crypto with me. I appreciate it today.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty, folks. Up next, our stories of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Akamai. You probably recognize that name. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Would you like to deliver extraordinary customer experiences and run code at the edge? Well, Akamai is truly powerful. Because Akamai has 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor, if we do the math on that, entirely in my head, that's over 4,000 locations. So you are always closer to your end user with Akamai, significantly cutting down on latency. Akamai will also greatly improve customer experience. Your customers will get to the content, apps, sites, and video they need without lag, interruption, or latency during unexpected traffic spikes. Prepare for spikes in demand and optimize resources to provide the best experience for your customers. You will be amazed at Akamai's unparalleled performance. And you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. What about scalability? Well, don't worry about it, because application architects get the flexibility to scale enterprise applications with Akamai Edge Workers. With Edge Workers, your development teams can focus on building while letting Akamai take care of the challenges of scaling globally. And because Akamai empowers you to deploy serverless code at the edge so you won't experience the headaches of increased traffic at origin or the overheads that go with it, Akamai gives you the power to innovate right at the edge. Because your logic and functions are deployed and active at the nearest proximity to your end users, you're going to be getting the fastest end user experience around the globe. Akamai makes it simple to build right at the edge using JavaScript so you can innovate in real time. You get low latency access to data for custom code at the edge, and Akamai can optimize your API traffic delivery for edge applications. But what's the cost? Even with its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability, Akamai is comparatively priced. Because limits are set per request, you can be sure your workload will scale no matter the size of your user base. And being serverless means you'll see decreased overhead at origin too. You know Akamai and their reputation. They're trusted by the biggest brands in the world, and you're getting 10 times the locations of competitors for the fastest customer experience available. So check out the Akamai website to learn more about edge computing. Have a conversation with them. You might be surprised by just how competitive the pricing is. Build closer to your end user with Akamai, the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more. That's Akamai, AKAMAI.com/TNW. Thanks so much to Akamai for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. And now we hit our stories of the week. I just saw this story fly by in Vice yesterday. There was an interesting study done by Blavatnik School of Computer Science and also the School of Electrical Engineering in Tel Aviv. And in this study, the researchers were looking at if they could create what they call master faces in order to sort of encompass a large amount of faces for facial recognition. So what does that all mean? Well, think of it like a master key for a building where you've got all these different individual keys that you can stick in the lock and unlock it. But the person who needs to have access to the whole building has a master key that they can use to access all of the building. This is the same thing here. While we all have our individual faces, they were looking for a face that could apply to all of those individual faces. Now, these master key faces tend to be older faces and also tend to be ones that didn't have glasses or facial hair or very little facial hair. And with these faces, they tested them against 3 facial recognition systems that they call deep face recognition systems because these are really complex facial recognition systems: DLib, FaceNet, and SphereFace. According to Vice, they use these systems because they're capable of recognizing, quote, high-level semantic features of the faces that are more sophisticated than just using skin color or lighting effects. So essentially what they wanted to do is test them against some very robust and advanced facial recognition platforms and not just kind of use any old facial recognition platform where it might be easier to trick or get past the algorithm. So I'm going to read a few little pieces from this. It says the paper notes that white males of the age of 60 in the University of Massachusetts labeled faces in the wild data set tended to be less varied compared to younger groups. So much of that group could be covered by a single older master face. Additionally, only 2 of the 9 master faces created were female, which the paper notes matches the much lower frequency of female faces in that labeled faces in the wild data set. So essentially, it shows that facial recognition software or attempts to show the facial recognition software does have its flaws and it can be biased because in that data set, you have a group of folks that fall into certain categories. And so when those categories are sort of solved for with a master face, it's a little bit easier to get the face that you're looking for there. So one of the things that I think is important to understand about this is that, this was not a create a master key for the facial recognition technology that we're used to, be it an Android device or an iOS device, which is a whole different kind of set. They were not testing it against those platforms, but instead we're testing it against well-known facial recognition systems that are often used kind of across the landscape for different types of facial recognition technologies and features. So it wasn't immediately we cracked iOS's Face ID or Android's face scan. I don't know what the feature is called on different Android devices, but face scanning and face unlock features.
Right.
But still, a very interesting thing that you can create master faces at all. That definitely shows that, if law enforcement or others are using facial recognition technology for crime and similar investigations, that, hey, here's one example of how facial recognition might not be the best way to do that because of how poorly it seems to be working.
Yeah, the thoroughness on any technology like this, like there is no such thing as truly 100% accurate on something like this. So you're already, and it really, I think, especially is illuminated by the potential harm or the potential risk associated with that match for someone who is misidentified for something. If they're looking for someone who murdered somebody and there is a false positive, but they trust this, but they don't know that it's a false positive and they trust the system inherently, you can let your imagination run wild as far as like all the bad that can happen out of that to someone who is perfectly innocent. Definitely, like you said, important to reiterate, this is not we found the picture that will crack the code on 40% of all faces or whatever. What this makes me realize, though, what it makes me think about is just the fact that there are so many people on this earth, and like I've seen Reddit forums or whatever, Reddit subreddits that are all entirely about matching two people's faces together to say like, hey, I found my alter ego. Check it out. Here I am. And here's this other person. And we look almost identical, but I have no idea who that person is. I don't even know them. Like there's enough people on this planet to assume and expect that we all have at least a few alter egos of our own running around. And if a facial recognition data set is thorough and complete enough, as I'm sure someone out there hopes that it would be, we're looking at some, false positives right out of the gate, just purely because as humans, like, yes, we're very differentiated, but we're also very similar in a lot of different ways too.
Right.
These systems are not perfect.
Yep, I agree. It's something that as I said, I'm glad the researchers are looking into this and that this information can be used. It's interesting that on this Vice piece, one of the articles on the side here is man wrongfully arrested by facial recognition tells Congress his story. These studies are going to be used as evidence in cases like this for sure, to show the flawed nature of facial recognition and how we all like to believe we're incredibly unique, but when it comes to how computers see us, maybe not so much the case.
Totally. And that's not even considering the fact that there are images that trick these systems. They don't even show a face. It's like a certain specific layout of pixels that can trick a system and make the system find a match, even though to our human eyes, we look at it and we're like, that's just a bunch of fuzz. That's a bunch of white noise. But it's the right zeros and ones in the right places to trick the system. So these things are totally fallible. And hard to trust, at least where we're at right now. And also all of the political implications of facial scanning and the imbalance of power and all this stuff right now. It's super concerning. People, this stuff there needs to be more of a future lens on the direction of this stuff so that if it has to exist, it's done equitably and it's done fairly and accurately. So
yes,
I don't know how close we're getting to that, but hopefully that's the direction that it's going. Sometimes I'm not so sure. All right. Up next, I'm going to talk about my story of the week. My story of the week is really probably pretty easy to guess because I'm interested in, at least this week, just yesterday was a Samsung Unpacked event. I did live coverage of it in the morning and, so covered the event live. And I now had, kind of 24 hours to kind of think about everything that was shown there. And I'm, of course, very curious to kind of get your thoughts on this as well, Micah. But just a quick rundown of what Samsung announced: the Galaxy Watch 4 and Galaxy Watch 4 Classic. And these are notable because this is the first watch to show the renewed effort, the kind of combined effort of Google and Samsung together on the new Wear OS 3. Wear OS in general has kind of not been that great as far as competition, competitive wearable platform, especially compared to the Apple Watch. So this would be the first indication of like, okay, well, Samsung's done really good in this space on their own software, Tizen. Now they're using their joint, their collaboration with Google in Wear OS 3. Is this going to be a competitive platform? Like, does this take what good Samsung has done already with Tizen and this new effort by Google and Samsung? Is this actually going to be competitive against the Apple Watch? And obviously, we're still too early to know the answer to that. It remains to be seen. But I will say, after watching the event yesterday, like I'm very intrigued. I'm very curious. I really like the design of the UI. Everything looked differentiated. That was one thing about Wear OS that I think initially I agreed with, and then over time I thought was kind of a downside to it, was that they didn't want fragmentation to rear its ugly head in wearables. And so Google, Google. And so Google made Wear OS a single UI that they dictated, and no one could customize it and make it their own. So you just ended up having like this whole variety of hardware that all ran the same software that Google wasn't very good at keeping up to date and keeping competitive. So that was a big downfall of the old Wear OS. So, but this looks really interesting. It also has body composition measurement, which I'm still like kind of a little clueless as far as what exactly that is. It's able to it has a different kind of sensor capability of determining like the makeup of your body, if you're holding water, like retaining water for any reason or whatever, that sort of stuff on a deeper level, which I'm curious about, but I'm just not the type to use features like this. Is that something that interests you, Micah? Like, do you use with your Apple Watch? Are you metric heavy? Do you care about a lot of these like health metrics and stuff?
Not actively, I guess. So yeah. I love having all of that information data tracked so that if I need it, I can pull it up for, understanding kind of where I am health-wise, et cetera. But it's it all just kind of sits there until it needs to come up. For some people, they're daily checking in, seeing how things go up or down or left or right. But for me, it's not so much about that. It's kind of looking at trends. And that's one of the things that Apple has improved upon, is making that health information more of a trend type thing. So you can see, hey, over the course of the last month, your respiration overnight has increased, which is typically a sign of stress and poor sleep, et cetera. So I think that metrics are a very good, like if a wearable device can collect those metrics, I say, have that, because while it might not be important in the moment and you might not be interested in the moment, when you go, in modern medicine, for the most part, because because doctors are so overwhelmed with the different folks that they have in a given day, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to be a patient advocate if you want to kind of get anywhere with what's going on and being able to explain things. And so being able to come to your doctor and say, here's some of the stuff that you should know about what's going on with me. And here's some of the stuff that I've discovered or what have you, then it's very helpful in kind of going forth with that. So that's been my experience, and having these metrics make it very helpful.
Yeah. I'll be really curious and seeing some folks in chat who are interested in, measuring body mass and everything with the device, which seems relatively new. I don't know that I'm seeing many mainstream wearables doing that. Like yesterday during the event, I was doing a search and found like one or two that I had never heard of that apparently have this feature. So, I wouldn't be surprised if now that Samsung is shining a light on it, others in the industry start to kind of explore that as well. One thing to note about the watch: no Google Assistant functionality at launch, which I feel like is a big downside. Samsung, of course, wants you to use their Bixby, and I'm just not a fan of Bixby. I want to use my Google Assistant. So hopefully, if history is any indication, Samsung will come around on that eventually, but it's a bummer that it doesn't have that at launch. But and outside of the wearable, the really I would say the crux of the announcement was more focused on their foldables. And I'm definitely curious to hear what you have to say about this, but I'll kind of set this up a little bit. The Z Fold 3, that's the phone that folds out into the tablet. This is the third iteration, obviously. And now they've got, some new, more cutting edge features here. They've got an in-display camera. So, no more notch, no more pinhole or anything like that. It's hidden behind the display. There's a pixelated area. It's more pixelated there than it is anywhere else on the phone. So if you were to put a white screen on the display and look at it, you would see like a light gray kind of camera cutout essentially. And they lower the pixel count there in an effort to make, improve the resolution of the camera that has to shine through it. So when you turn on camera mode, the pixels there completely turn off. It lets the camera shine through. And then when the camera isn't in use, that 440 pixels per inch in that little area light up. So you get something there. You just don't get the full pixel array, let's say. So it's not completely invisible yet. That might happen at some point, but this is one of the most mainstream phones right now to be utilizing this. And I do believe that this is going to be the way of the future as far as front-facing cameras. It might be a couple of years, it might be 5 years, but I'm pretty certain at some point this is what most, at least premium phones are going to be doing, in order to solve the I don't want a hole in my display problem. Whether that's that important enough to fix or not is totally, subjective. But water resistance, IPX8 certified. Also an S Pen that is specific to the inside tablet screen. So it doesn't work on the outside, which makes me think, okay, well, Note users, this would be the Note then, because they're not doing the Note this year. But Note users really like to be able to pull out the phone and, I've got the last Note right here, and just jot really quickly on the front. They're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to unfold it into the big, large thing and do it. So that's kind of annoying. I don't know if that's an apples to apples comparison, but does a phone that folds out to a tablet, is that at all appealing to you? Just like as a use case? I mean, maybe from the tech enthusiast perspective, right. But do you think that's also, do you think that's appealing to the majority of people? I kind of don't. What do you think? Yeah.
I don't think that it's something that I'm into, and would argue that the majority of people are into, other than for the sort of novelty of it. But novelty only gets you so far before price becomes an issue. If this was priced around an average device and it had this novelty, then maybe you could get people to buy it. But this is like, you are almost required to be an enthusiast if you end up being willing to pay the price that this costs.
Yeah.
But then at that point,
$1,800.
Yeah. And then at that point, the enthusiast factor comes into play, where you are looking at, am I going to get something out of this, or is it, you have to like have an upper tier enthusiast almost, if that makes sense, in terms of financial means.
Yes.
Where that price is not going to have much of an impact. And so all of those things leave me kind of about this. Yeah. As far as practicality goes, I don't like that when it's folded, it's so much thicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that there is something to be said for a screen that gets bigger. I think that's super cool. I think about the devices that at CES that they've shown, where instead of it being a fold, it's like a roll. And so you can sort of grab it like this and pull it out. That is more of a concept that I would be into for the fact that it doesn't become so much wider, because I do carry my phone in my pocket. I carry it, in a slim pocket in my bag and all of those things. Like, I don't want, if I'm trading the ease of being held and the ease of storage for a bigger screen, I don't really need to do that because I've got devices that have bigger screens. And frankly, the screen on my device is already quite big. So yeah, I am still not sold on the fold. And I'm curious if Apple ends up doing this because ultimately I see this as a stopgap measure between what we have now and what I feel like the future is going to be, which is kind of what is the word I'm looking for? An unlimited screen size by way of augmented reality, where you don't really need to have a screen whenever you can turn space in your vision into a screen itself. And so suddenly, you've got in proportion, 100-inch television in front of you if you want to, or off to the side, you've got your little stuff that you need to do for your messaging or what have you. And so I really see this as like, this is what we have to do for now because that AR world isn't ready yet. And so we're trying to figure out how to get bigger screens and more productivity or what have you into this slab of glass form factor that we have. But what we're really striving after is a screen without borders. And I'm comfortable and happy waiting for that as it stands. Unless, again, you come out with that rollable screen where I'm not, taking up a huge chunk of my pocket.
The rollables look really promising. Yeah, Oppo had one earlier this year. LG, before they gave up on their mobile stuff, had announced a rollable, but Oppo X 2021 was something that they showed off. And that solves kind of part of the problem that you're talking about. It's not as thick, right? It's literally, it's a normal phone thickness, but it still has that kind of a foldable display in it because it literally rolls around the edge in order to retract itself. And so it kind of accomplishes what you're talking about. And then to go back to your point as far as like kind of the type of consumer or the level of consumer that is required for $1,800, foldable device. I think what I've become comfortable with is, we've got our low range, we've got our mid range, we've got our premium, and then we've got our luxury. And this feels like a luxury device. This is like, heck yeah, I've got $1,800 and I just don't care. I'm getting this thing because it's cool and no one else has one. It's a total luxury device. I don't know where the necessity is there, which takes me to, I think, for me, the most exciting announcement from the event. And no, it wasn't the Galaxy Buds 2. It was the Galaxy Z Flip 3. And I would say in the past, the Z Flip has been more of like more of a curiosity for me than a holy cow, okay, I think I'm excited about it. This is the first time that I think I'm excited about it. They did what they needed to do with the foldable. They got it under $1,000, $999 for this thing. They've improved which to go back to your point, I think takes it out of the luxury category and puts it into the premium phone category. People are way more accustomed to spending near $1,000, whether they should or not, I guess is another question. But we are more used to that. And so you're taking this, third generation, now 3 years of experience Samsung's had on refining its foldable technology. You put it into a form factor that fits smaller in your pocket because it's down into that square when it's folded up, and then folds out to a normal size phone. That seems like the kind of decision that somebody, general consumer, goes into a carrier store and says, I want to get a new phone. I've got $1,000, and they show you the options. They're like, here's the top of the line iPhone. Here's the top of the line Android, Samsung Galaxy or a Pixel phone, Pixel 6. Or you can take that same amount and you can get this thing, which has internals that are that are basically the same as any premium smartphone. I think that maybe the downside is that the camera system is not amazing. It's not like, the best camera that Samsung has, but it's still pretty darn good. Samsung's cameras in general, especially in this category, are pretty strong. I think this just suddenly moves this foldable into totally achievable territory for the average consumer, and I think that kind of makes it somewhat special. So I think this is the most exciting announcement from yesterday.
Agreed. It's a really interesting device. I think that it plays on the nostalgia factor of all of us who loved our different flip phones that we had in the past. The fact that it has that screen on the front, so then there's some practicality to the fact that it folds, taking up less space. So it almost falls into the realm of, we've seen in recent years a return to the smaller phones and people liking to be able to kind of hold the phone in their hand and not have it be this gigantic thing, but then you can make it into the gigantic thing that you want. This feels more akin to what makes sense in terms of foldables to me, where we're not taking an already gigantic thing and making it giganticer, and at the expense of kind of the pocketability of the device, but instead we have practical use for the fold and sort of falling into the trends in a good way of what people want from their smartphone device.
Yeah, indeed. So these devices are now in the hands of many reviewers. I wish I had them in my hands. I don't yet, but I'm working on it. So I'm sure in the next week, we're going to start seeing, actual reviews. Scooter X just posted in our chat a comparison of the cameras on the Z Fold 3. And sure enough, the hidden selfie camera looks all smeared and weird, because it's shining through these pixels and everything. So these things are not perfect, but when we're talking about kind of cutting edge technology, this is Samsung's kind of their foldable efforts are them pushing the boundaries for their business anyways in the smartphone world. And I do believe that Apple is working on something like this, or at least they've got it in testing. Who knows if Apple's ever going to release it, but they have to be working on some sort of foldable technology behind the scenes, at least to explore it and see whether it's worth anything, whether it's worth it to them to move forward with it. I'd be really surprised if they weren't. I'd be very curious to see what Apple came up with. If they actually wanted to hit the market with a foldable device, I think they'd do a pretty solid job. They always do. So
yeah, it would be interesting. I would be, they just have to figure out how to make it slim. And it's interesting. There have been some rumors lately about the way that they are looking at slimming down some of the internal components, as if you can anymore, of the different chips that they have installed. And it does make me wonder if it is for the purpose of going for foldable, as they too are working towards that AR future, to have some sort of stopgap. Just because at this point now you look at the market and a lot of companies are working on that foldable thing. So you do wonder if Apple's going to play its own part in that space. But even still, I think so. If they, I'll probably eat my words, but if they offer a non-foldable and a foldable, I would tend toward the side of the non-foldable device that continues to be kind of this form factor. If it's that thick thing, I don't want to put, a Hershey's almond chocolate bar in my pocket. I would prefer to continue to have that thinner form factor.
Yeah, fair enough. I totally agree. All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Tech News Weekly. We do this show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. Just go there, subscribe, and you won't miss a single episode. And thank you for doing that.
By the way, if you'd like to check out all of our shows ad-free, if you want to get them all ad-free, all you have to do is check out Club Twit. For $7 a month, you get all of the Twitch shows with no ads. That's right, completely ad-free listening. You also get access to the exclusive Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, and what is quickly becoming the most popular feature. Yes, that's right. It is the members-only Discord server where you can chat with the hosts, producers, and others at Twit, as well as your fellow Club Twit members. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot there, a lot of different channels that offer different topics, and you can talk about the show in the chat. We just had Rene Ritchie earlier on, and he was in the chat as well, talking with the Tech News Weekly folks during the show. So super fun. If you'd like to be a part of the fun and also just get a warm feeling in your stomach because you know you're supporting us directly, $7 a month, twit.tv/clubtwit. Also, if you'd like to tweet at me or follow me on social media, I am at Micah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks. And then you should also check out later today, Smart Tech Today, which I do with Matthew Casanelli, all about IoT and everything involved with that. And then tomorrow, iOS Today, which I record with Rosemary Orchard, where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS, all the OSs that Apple has on offer. What about you, Jason?
Nice. Well, I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. You can catch me on All About Android every Tuesday, talking Android. And this week I put up a review on Hands on Tech. So that's twit.tv/HOT. Go there and you'll see me get a little nerdy about music technology, Modal's Sculpt Synth SE, which is a little desktop synth, a couple $100, but it's just a lot of fun. I had a great time with that. And so my review is live on Hands on Tech right now and ready for you to watch. So please do that. Big thanks to everybody at the studio who helps us do the show each and every week. John Ashley, Burke, John Slanina for testing. So much happens behind the scenes and we couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you for that. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on Twit TV. Each and every week, Thursday, that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.